Today, I'm going to give you 7 tips on how to find gems in nature, especially if you are a layperson who doesn't know much about gems. If you're the kind of person who likes to pick up rocks out there, have access to a rural property, road, river, farm, or any place that has any kind of rocks, and you find the idea of finding a gem interesting, then this video is for you. The tips I'm going to show you in this video are very basic but very effective because they can help anyone find gems in nature, even if they don't know much about the subject. But first, let me ask you a question. Did you know that most of the regions with gem potential have not yet been explored? Well, a lot of people would pay a lot of money to know that because if you figure out how to find gems in nature, there could be a deposit of high-value untapped gems right near you. That's why I've come up with the best tips to help you get started, especially if you don't know anything or know very little about the subject and want to start this incredible and very healthy adventure that brings us closer to nature. To make things easier for you, I'm going to give you just 7 simple tips to help you find your first gemstone in nature. People usually look for a hobby to pass the time and keep their mind occupied. So if you feel tired, stressed, anxious, depressed, or just don't know what to do with your free time, you should know that gemstone hunting is an excellent alternative therapy that has improved the quality of life for many people around the world. Not to mention the number of people who have changed their lives after finding super rare gemstones. So how do you go about finding some gems? Well, the first tip seems a bit obvious, and it really is. Start by going where the gems are. There is no rule. Anywhere will do. Don't worry for now if it is a beautiful place or not, or if it is the place that has the best gems. The best thing to do is to start an adventure in search of gems, collecting the best gems you can, because all this will put you in direct contact with nature and will provide a great experience. I know that for many this sounds too obvious, but it has to be said because there are people who want to find the gems but don't want to leave the house. That's why this first contact with gemstones is necessary, so that you can see what they look like in their raw state in nature, whether in the river or in a ravine. The interesting thing here is to touch them, to feel them with your hand, to notice their texture in the earth and how the types of stones change as you go up or down the hill, or how the earth changes color. So do the stones that are there. This is all part of the personal experience you need to have with the stones, and it will make a big difference when it comes to finding gemstones. You'll see that in the same region, the stones can vary greatly in type, shape, and color, which makes all the difference, because a region with a lot of ordinary stones can be very close to a gem mine. This change in stone types, colors, and textures is something you have to experience in person. And even if you don't find any gemstones, the experience and contact with nature alone is worth it for the benefits to your health. Which brings us to the second tip. Don't look for the gemstones directly, look for the signs. Each gemstone has its own signs, also called satellite signs. In other words, these satellites are common stones and minerals that indicate the presence of gemstones in a region. So we can say that for each type of gemstone that can be found in nature, there are specific indicators. In this case, so as not to make the video too long, I'm just going to mention a few universal indicators that can be used to find different types of gemstones. The first of these is undoubtedly mikas and malachite, which are these little plates that look like plastic or pieces of broken glass. Very fragile, loose, and flake off very easily. They look very much like fish scales. This type of mineral is found in many mines and gemstone regions. Another stone that is considered common and is found in large quantities where there are several types of gemstones is black tourmaline, mainly in association with white quartz. If you find a place with lots of white stones and black specks, it's probably black tourmaline. If you know or have seen a place like this, it could indicate that it's a good place to start looking for gemstones. However, you should pay attention to the following. If you have access to a river and you find stones that are heavier than normal, this is a good indication that this river may also have gemstones. An excellent example of heavy minerals found in rivers are ilmenites and chromites. They're basically a type of material that looks like a very dark piece of iron, but what sets them apart is that they're quite heavy compared to most of the other stones that we find in rivers. So any type of heavy, dark-colored stone that you find in a river already indicates that it's a good place to start looking. In addition, areas with pegmatites and granites in general are also great places to look. Pegmatites and granites are usually found in mountain ranges or in places with small mountains in general. Pegmatites resemble granite, but the difference is that the grains and minerals contained in them are much larger. We can see the pieces. There may be a wall or gallery, or perhaps a small, huge mountain with several fragmented pieces of pegmatite. If you find some in the wild, you'll realize that it's not just a single small stone. It could even be a very large one. However, if you find one or two, or maybe three of these minerals together in the same place, your chances of finding a gemstone there are very high. The third best tip I will give you now is learn to observe gems so that you don't end up thinking that every stone you find is valuable. Of course, you can take as long as you want. You can't learn everything at once. But if you are interested in finding out if there are any gems hidden in the area where you live, you can start by learning about one stone at a time. Learning about the major gemstones first, and over time you'll gain knowledge and learn where these stones are found, what their indications are, and how to find them. But if you want to take a shortcut, here on the channel we have several videos that teach you how to find different types of gemstones, from diamonds to jasper. You can even do some research here on the channel if you want to find a specific stone. Or you can go further and access our ebook on gemology for beginners, where you will find a complete catalogue of over 145 minerals. It's an accessible book and it's completely digital, which means you can access it wherever and whenever you want. Now, on to the next tip. Don't be fooled by any stone you find. If you found a stone very easily, there is a good chance it is not a very valuable stone. This is quite easy to understand. Think with me. The most valuable gemstones are valued precisely because they are hard to find, they are rare. So if you found a stone very easily, it is a good sign that it is not a very rare stone and therefore not very valuable. But calm down, this is not a rule. If you follow us here on the channel, you know that it is possible, and there are many cases of ordinary people who have found valuable diamonds worth millions of dollars in rivers. Yes, but just as there are very lucky people, you should know that it can sometimes take a prospector 15 to 30 days, maybe even longer, sifting through gravel every day to find a single diamond. In that time, he may sift through more than 2 or 3 tons of gravel to find his first diamond. Of course, if diamonds were so easy to find, they wouldn't be so expensive. But if a stone is hard to find, you should know that this is not a bad thing, because the harder a stone is to find, the more expensive it will be. But where is the best place to look for gemstones? Well, to find that out, you have to do some local research. There is no way to know what kind of gemstones a place has without going there to investigate. Even an experienced geologist has no way to know what kind of stones a place has without doing some research, so you literally have to get your hands dirty. Once you've been in contact with nature, you've felt the textures, you've learned to analyze the stones and recognize the signs of precious stones that I've mentioned, you're ready to act. I recommend that you take the stones you find, collect as many as you can, whether in a river, on a farm, on a hill, or in the mountains. Then put the collected stones in a bucket and clean them well with water, because it's much easier to identify clean stones. And now comes the next tip, which is to separate the stones by color, because the color of each stone is determined by its chemical composition. In other words, this will help you identify the stones you already find in nature, and you can also separate the stones by the texture they have. For example, try to find patterns in the stones that have some similar characteristics and separate them all together. When you do this, you'll see how much easier your rock identification process becomes. In addition, if you can mark the place where you found these stones, you can make the identification by location, because some types of stones cannot be found in some places. For example, if you find a green stone in a river, it could probably be a jasper or a green quartz, but it won't be a tourmaline or an emerald, because these two stones are not found in rivers. Another interesting tip is that dark-colored stones are generally more difficult to identify because there are many ores that have a dark color. On the other hand, the chance of a dark stone being a valuable stone is much lower. There are few black stones that are really valuable. Speaking of value, one of the things you'll want to know when you find your first gem is whether the stone you found has any value. Well, in this case, the truth is that there is no price scale for gemstones, because each stone is unique in color, quality, and clarity. So there is no way to know exactly what the price of each stone is and how much it is worth. Many people complain because I don't give a table with the value of each gemstone program, but the truth is that such a table doesn't even exist. Gemstones are not like gold, copper, or silver. Gemstones vary greatly in value, which is why a gemologist must specialize in gem valuation. To get an idea of how much a gemstone might be worth, look at the stone here, for example. It is an aquamarine. We can see that it's a beautiful piece of jewelry. While this other stone here is also an aquamarine, it's also very beautiful, but it's considered to be of inferior quality. Look at the two aquamarines. However, they have different values. This is true for any other stone. So don't worry about the value of a stone yet. Worry first about learning to have this contact with nature. Follow each of these steps in these tips, because they are really important. But let's say you want to know how much a stone is worth. Well, in that case, I will give you 3 alternatives. The first one is to find an experienced prospector in your area so that he can evaluate your stone. The second and most recommended option would be to consult a geologist or gemologist in your area who will be able to define more precisely what type of stone you have found. Once you know exactly what type of stone you have found, you can negotiate with a jewelry store or mineral dealer. However, if you don't have access to either of the above options, you can access our digital gemology beginner's book, which will teach you how to identify any stone you find in nature with home tests, without the need for expensive equipment. And of course, don't expect any single stone to have a very high value. But who knows when your lucky day will come? In terms of odds, it's easier to find a gemstone than it is to win the lottery. So make it your main goal to have fun and relax while walking and hiking in nature. And if you're lucky, you could win a few $1 million by finding a rare diamond. Depending on the country you live in, you might even want to tell us what country you're from. Thanks for liking and subscribing. Watch this video to learn how to search for diamonds for free. Good luck, gem hunters!